Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the wonderful Taryn Hatcher and the dynamic Joe Fordyce. The Flyers are 10 games into their season. They are 6-2-2. Overall, a pretty good start. I think fans are probably happy with it. I think the Flyers management and coaching staff is probably pretty pleased with the start, considering the injuries they've had. But we're going to look at surprises, both good and bad for the team so far through this 10-game start. They have the Maple Leafs on Wednesday night at the Wells Fargo Center. You can catch pregame and postgame live with Taryn Hatcher, directed and produced by Joe Fordyce. So let's get into these surprises, both good and bad. Taryn, I will start with you. Your biggest surprise on the good side.
I would say, I would say more than anything, probably Cam. I know that everyone knew Cam could come in and be a goal scorer, but I think for him to come in as kind of like piping hot as he did goal scoring wise, even though he's gone a little bit quiet lately, goal scorers go on streaks. That just happens. I think he'll end up back on a streak pretty soon. But the other one that I think it's not a surprise. It was just like a necessary check mark on the list for the Flyers to be successful has been Carter Hart. Like, especially after opening night. Opening night, I really thought, oh gosh, there's still shades of the sins of last year haunting him. And pretty quickly he put that to rest, and you didn't see it again. The way he goaltended in the Edmonton game, the way he goaltended in the Calgary loss. He's had a lot of really good games where you look, he's probably had 3 games where you look at the score and you go, if this isn't Carter playing the way he did, the Flyers either lose the game or they lose the game by a significantly larger margin. And that just is necessary because I think we thought, can the Flyers play around Carter if he's not good? And right now it's more often than not, can the Flyers pull through and not lose this game for Carter because he's been so good? So that would be the happiest surprise for me is even despite that second period of the opening night game where things look like they might go awry with Carter this year. I think he looks like an improvement on pre-2021 Carter. I think he looks like he's taken that next step we want him to take. And that's going to be necessary for the Flyers' success this year, next year, many years to come. So.
Yeah, I think Carter Hart's been their biggest storyline so far this season, right? In the sense that he had to get back to the Carter Hart of old, and so far through 7 games, he really looks like himself. He's talking like himself. Everything about Carter Hart reminds us of before last season, and that's a really good sign.
Can I just add something to that? Speaking of talking like himself, because I was talking to Paul Holmgren about this, and he had a good laugh out of it. I found in our interactions with Carter and other interviews I've seen with Carter as well, I feel like last year, obviously the body language was bad. The confidence wasn't great. You could tell like he kind of wasn't himself, even when he would try to put on like a brave face publicly, all of that. This year, my experiences with Carter and other media interviews that I've watched, not only is he back to kind of being like lighthearted and even keeled, he's even like a little bit more so in the driver's seat of like media conversations where he'll very much be like, I don't really want to answer that. Or he's not afraid to shortchange an answer to a reporter that he doesn't really feel like he needs to justify, which is something that veteran players who have a fair amount of confidence in themselves and their own public image and the things that they say and the things that they do off the ice, you notice with those players, you notice with like a Claude Giroux or James Van Riemsdyk or whatever. That's something that I've noticed Carter developed this year that I like, because it's not I'm this little kid with big expectations on a big stage anymore. He's very much, not that he was ever a little kid, but I think there was like some wide-eyedness to Carter Hart before. And I think he shows up and it's business and it's a job and that's how he handles it, is in this very seasoned veteran kind of way. And I really actually, as much as I hate it for me, because we don't always get Carter giving us like a 5-minute answer because he feels pressured to give me something for our interview. I like it for him because I think it shows a certain amount of maturity and confidence that you need to navigate the media and the world when you're a professional athlete. So It's just an interesting note. Paul Holmgren was like, when I said that to him, he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, he'll say, he would never used to say before, or he'd be like, oh, do I have to answer that? I'm a little uncomfortable. Like he would be a little sheepish. And now he'll just sit there and be like, yeah, I don't really want to answer that question if that's cool. And I'm like, okay, Carter, go for it. So interesting side note.
And you know what's interesting too, and Taryn, we can go back to the press conference after the season opening game where you mentioned we saw those kind of flaws that seemed to show up last year and people started to have some flashbacks. And then we saw his press conference. And I remember we did almost the whole segment on the post-game show that night that his press conference looked different. And it was almost a comforting factor that he didn't have his head down. And his demeanor wasn't like this sort of sad puppy dog-ish looking thing, which last year happened almost regularly. And it was almost like, you know what, see that? He's going to be okay. Because look at that right there. He's not, he's not down on himself. He's not kind of feeling the blues. It's like, okay, when's the next game? And he's ready to go. And it's a distinct difference from what we saw a lot of last year. And, it may sound trivial and sort of like focusing on things that don't matter, but I think it does matter. A guy's demeanor matters. It matters in all sports. And I think you can go across the board and say the guys that mope around are generally not the guys that win. And when you look at a guy talk in a press conference, and if you didn't know, you couldn't tell whether they won or lost, aside from the words they're saying, that's a guy that is built and is ready, I think, to win and be a winner.
I think it's also in like this really difficult time. It's also a reflection of just the guys, like, honestly, like mental health through all of it, which we've seen how important it is. Look at what's going on with Carey Price up in Montreal. I mean, you feel for the guy, you feel terrible for his family, and you understand how it can I mean, I could understand how it could happen to literally any player last year, given what their lives really looked like. I mean, I talked to Keith Yandel about being in Florida through it all, and he was like, it's a mixed bag of, you're happy that the world is open around you a little bit and that the COVID numbers weren't that bad where he was, but also I can't do anything. So I'm observing a normal world, but I'm not participating in it. Here in Philly, there wasn't really a normal world to observe or to participate in for these guys. And it's nice to see. And when we talked about Edmonton was open. He could do whatever he wanted. He could go wherever he wanted all summer long. It seemed like he had a very normal summer, which is a really good thing for him. But it's also just, I personally, and people can call me a homer or whatever they want about it, I don't really care. We're talking about human beings and it's important. I personally, last year, when AV sat him, I started to sit there and go, oh no, is the mental health of this very young person living through a very challenging time in the world in a very high pressure situation, is it going to be okay? And this year he's come back and he seems happier and stronger than ever. And that can only be a good thing for a human being and for, someone that's in a really high pressure position on your hockey team. So yeah, I fully agree. It's like, it was hard to watch sometimes last year. It was like, you almost wanted him to just, when AV sat him, you were kind of like, thank God this kid needs a break. And at the same time, you feel bad because there's a certain level of, I think, shame maybe to that. It felt like there was for him. So I don't know. Good to see him back is the long story long.
100%. Good to see Carter Hart back. I'm sure Flyers fans feel the exact same way as Taryn and Joe in that regard. I'm sure the team does too. Joe Fordyce, how about you? Biggest surprise so far in this 10-game sport? 10 games. Yeah, excuse me.
I'm going to say in the goal crease, and I'm going to say Martin Jones. I was super skeptical of this signing in the offseason. I didn't like. Now, I do feel like because of Carter's situation last year and how much Brian Elliott had to play, that we got a little spoiled by Brian Elliott. And Brian Elliott's attitude was always up and I'm here to do whatever for the team. And he would give you solid effort almost every night that he played. And I think we got spoiled by the backup goaltender being essentially the starting goaltender for a lot of the season and playing like the starting goaltender. So you bring in Martin Jones. He's at a low price tag, and it kind of seemed almost like this throwaway type of signing. And it was just like, okay, if Carter doesn't play well, we're in serious trouble here if Martin Jones has to play a lot. So two things have happened. He hasn't had to play a lot. And when he has played, he's had unbelievable efforts against some of the top teams that this Flyers team has played so far on the schedule. Yeah. And that, I think, is the part where you're kind of, I don't want to say, I'm not saying he's destined to fail, but like you're almost waiting for, the carriage to turn back into a pumpkin or something here, like the way he's playing. Now, the other night, I will say, in the Flyers' last game, I don't think there could have been more pucks shot into the logo on the jersey than you could find, but it doesn't matter. A save's a save, and it has to be made regardless. You still have to move post to post. You have to track the puck. You have to deal with guys in front causing havoc, all of that stuff. And that's one game. But Martin Jones has been far and away better than I think anybody could have expected. Certainly anybody that's watched him play for San Jose for the last 3 seasons or so. And let's not undersell what the backup goaltender is. Teams in this league, outside of maybe Tampa, who Vasilevsky plays generally more than most starting goaltenders around the league, teams don't win with one goaltender anymore. They just don't. They need to have another guy that comes in and can win a game, that can make a start against a solid team and give a solid effort and give his team a chance to win. And I would argue that Martin Jones has done way more than give his team a chance to win in every start that he's had this season. And really, I can't even remember this season going, wow, that was a bad goal out by Martin Jones. It just hasn't happened. And to me, that's a surprise, because I would say I felt apprehensive about that signing. And again, it could be the Elliott factor. The recent success is definitely part of it, but I'm going to say Martin Jones is by far my biggest surprise for this team this year.
Especially because 2 of his wins came against Boston and the Caps.
Yeah,
like it's not like they're putting Martin Jones in to play the Coyotes. They put him in against Boston and the Capitals and Vancouver and he's played really well in Vancouver and he's from there. But like the Capitals and Scott was the one who kept every shot the Caps take. Scott was like, oh, another shot right into the logo. Like he kept pointing it out. But the thing is that you look at like what if Ovi slap shots one right into your logo, you just have to not give up a massive rebound, which Martin Jones also like was on top of that night. He played well against Boston. AV has put him in positions to play really good teams. And to me, and I haven't talked to him about it, so this is just perception. To me, it seems like Martin Jones really wants to be a starter somewhere. Probably not here, but really wants to be a starter somewhere. And I thought if Carter didn't play well this season, that could get really ugly for the Flyers. If Martin Jones did come back, play really, really well, Carter didn't play well, Martin Jones wants to be a starter, Carter's, whatever. And instead you have a best case scenario, knock on wood, right now, where Carter is playing well. Martin Jones is trying to show someone that he can be a starter, and he's playing like he can be a starter. So yeah, the goaltending situation, I think we were all pretty apprehensive about when the season started, has been just a joy, just a pure joy.
And just to Taryn, you mentioned the Boston game. That was his first start of the year. And he stared down that first line of Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak. And they were out there at times with their top D pair of McAvoy and Grzelcyk on the power play. And it was terrifying to watch what way they moved the puck around. And he was there at every turn to stop their opportunities. The Flyers didn't play a particularly disciplined game in that game against Boston. And I think, as we all know and we saw last year, if you give that Boston top line, and particularly those guys on the blue line that run that power play, they have McAvoy and Matt Grzelcyk, who both can run a power play with that top line. It is a terrifying power play, and you're in for a long night generally if you take penalties. And that night the Flyers took penalties. and Jones flat out bailed him out. There's no other way to say it other than what he did in that game. And that seems to have set the tone for his season, at least thus far. And that is super impressive.
Jordy, who's your biggest surprise?
So it's funny. Joe took mine. Nice. No. So I was going to go.
Think of another one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I have another one.
Well, this is how you can tell. We don't pre-script any of this stuff.
We don't.
We just get on.
In case you were curious from all the other times that things have gone awry on this show, none of it's planned.
No, so I'm glad Joe picked Martin Jones. I think he has to be up there. 95 saves on 100 shots. That's crazy.
That is wild.
Me, yeah. I will go Justin Braun. How about Justin Braun leading the Flyers?
Ooh.
Flyers defenseman in points and in plus minus. He's a +8, which is the best among the Flyers defensive group. He has 7 points, also best among the Flyers defensive group. He's been really good. He's played 20 minutes a game. He's had to be a top pair guy again, with Ryan Ellis missing 7 games. So I'll say Justin Braun. I think he's been terrific and just real steady. When you play the right way, like he does, sometimes points fall in your lap. Sometimes you get fortunate with some assists, and he's playing the right way. He's been good. So yeah, I'm going to go Justin Braun just because.
Can I have an honorable mention here?
Yeah.
Because Justin Braun prompted me of this as well. Whatever is in Justin Braun's whatever water bottle secret stuff from Space Jam, I think Claude Giroux is also drinking, and I think young seasoned Claude Giroux, it has been. Since I moved back from Hawaii and got back here, I think since before that big injury that he had, I have not seen him look this agile and fast. And he's always had that same compete level. He's always had that same 2-step burst. But actually, I thought my first year working here, he seemed like he was really frustrated with himself that maybe he had lost a step. And with it took him a full year to become himself again after that injury. I feel like this year he kind of undid 2 seasons of aging, and he looks and Justin Braun has the same thing. That's why it reminded me of it. Is I think Justin Braun looks faster this year than he's looked in any other year as a Philadelphia Flyer, and I think Claude Giroux. I mean, JJ says it all the time, he really doesn't think that it's playing for a contract. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but if it is, they should just tell him hey, we're going to sign you to a 1-year contract every single year just to keep you going, and we'll pay you handsomely and we'll keep re-signing you. We promise. But because he looks, not that I think anyone should, if you're really around the team a lot and you go to practice every day, Jordan and I joke about it at practice all the time. If Claude Giroux falls down, he looks mad at the ice. He's that competitive still every single day. It's not a surprise that he can still compete at nearly 34. It is a surprise that he looks like he's aged backwards a few years coming into this season. And I don't know what it is, but sneaky happy surprise is how. Because normally you'd watch that top line and TK's all-star year, TK is scoring, weird, fun goals that energize the team. And Sean Couturier is being Sean Couturier and doing everything you want. And Claude Giroux is there and he's still the star, but it's kind of, he was underappreciated, I think, a little bit. And this year you watch that top line, Claude Giroux is the best player on that top line most nights. And that's been not the case all the time in the past few seasons. So I think Claude Giroux's start to the season is a sneaky dark horse surprise. And I hope it continues because it's been very fun to watch what he's doing. It looks like 5 years ago. It's kind of bizarre.
It looks like Claude might have had some secret meetings in the offseason with Tom Brady or something. He's on the TB12 plan.
Seriously. Stopped eating strawberries and tomatoes, and here he is.
Flyers Talk is brought to you by Great Railing. Stop into Great Railing for the highest quality and lowest prices on all your railing, decking, and fencing needs. Yeah, I think a lot of people are okay saying Claude Giroux's not the Flyers' best player anymore. But right now he's kind of playing like one, like Taryn said, and that's a major surprise and a good one. Taryn Hatcher, how about a surprise that's not so good for you so far through 10 games?
Ryan Ellis's injury.
Yeah.
That's it for me. It was something that we thought was going to be a couple days, and now it's weeks, and now it's doubtful for a while. And he has an injury pass, but I feel like everybody kind of glossed over that when he signed here. Like it was all about his upside, and the downside isn't that like his availability is usually his worst ability. And
Yeah.
and that's not great. Because although I will say Nick Seeler was another happy surprise, you never really noticed Nick Seeler being very bad, which is the most you can ask out of someone in that situation. Like, just don't be bad, especially when you're, I hate to say it because Keith Yandle has done a lot of great things offensively in this young season, but like Keith Yandle makes some defensive plays where you're like, that was not ideal. And Nick Seeler didn't compound that issue most nights. But ideally, like with as well as Justin Braun is playing, if you put Justin Braun with Keith Yandle, that pair seems a lot more solid. And Ryan Ellis and Ivan Provorov, you want to see together. Like I think it changes Provy's game, and Ellis is a great defenseman. Him being out for this long, this early is like very concerning to me, especially when you hear AV talk about it being lingering, because lingering issues usually linger, and there's a whole season still to play. So yeah, that would be the Ellis of it all, is kind of a sad surprise. And I won't even throw Kevin Hayes in that mix, because from everything I've seen from Kevin Hayes skating and practicing and traveling with the team and whatever, it seems like he's very much like raring to go and hungry to get back, whether he's ready or not, but we shall see. But his trajectory seems more like on the road to recovery, where Ryan Ellis is kind of like, where are we at today? So yeah, I need, like I said, best ability is availability, and that's just not been there.
It is a little concerning that Ryan Ellis has played only 3 games, because he does have somewhat of an injury history. You can't deny that. I think I found this very surprising. I remember when I was looking at defensive numbers between some of the newcomers on defense, Rasmus Ristolainen's played, he's in his 9th year. Ryan Ellis is in his 11th year. Rasmus Ristolainen has played only 15 fewer games than Ryan Ellis. Only 15. And he's in his 9th compared to Ryan Ellis's 11th. That's because Ryan Ellis has been hurt. He has been hurt. He has missed games. So, you know, I think you'd be lying if you said you weren't concerned about this injury. So that's a go on Taryn. Ryan Ellis, that's their biggest addition of the offseason, and he's only played 3 games. I think the Flyers are hoping he's back in the lineup soon and really.
I also think when it comes to Rasmus Ristolainen, Buffalo was going to. I also think with Rasmus Ristolainen, like in Buffalo, if he had his foot put in a blender and a hand missing, they still would have played him like 26 minutes of ice time, to be fair. So I don't think a little bit of that is the Buffalo of it all. But
I'm just talking games played. I'm just talking games played.
I know.
Yeah.
I think I mean his durability from like my research when he first got traded here is like pretty astounding. But yeah, like Buffalo, from what I observed, it didn't seem like Buffalo was particularly like, Rasmus is a little dinged up, maybe we're gonna scratch him tonight. I don't think that literally happened ever in 8 years of playing in Buffalo. Yeah. Whereas I think maybe Nashville was a little bit more, but Ryan Ellis also is just not as durable, but to your point, to be fair. But
and they're different guys. Body size, like Rasmus is bigger, and you can tell he doesn't like sitting, where Ryan Ellis is smaller. He's got to take care of his body. I understand that too. Yeah.
That's a little sizist.
He is. Ryan Ellis is a lot.
I'm just kidding.
He's a lot sizist.
I'm just kidding.
No, I know.
I'm just being a jerk.
I will say though that stat is kind of
jarring.
You consider how Ristolainen plays, his style of play compared to Ellis, and the fact that he's only played 15 less games in those fewer seasons is definitely a telling stat.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, if my surprise on the not so good side, and it might feel like I continue to go the negative route with this guy, but Travis Sanheim to me has been a negative. And I don't feel like he looks like a confident player out there. And he does show the signs of a guy that was a first round pick, and a guy who can be a every game capable second line defense pair. But then I feel like he shows signs of a guy who is still struggling to shed that sort of young player label and a guy who's still learning. And not that players ever stop learning, but, careless plays in his own zone with the puck and other things that are concerning to me, like a one-on-one with a forward in a neutral zone and the guy just blows by him when it seems like what we all know of Travis Sanheim is that he is a good skater. That shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen. I feel like this is a big year for Sanheim. He got the new deal, and it's a big year for him to step up and just establish himself as the second line D-pair guy. And it just hasn't happened over these first bunch of games. And, there's plenty of season left. But again, I think the thing that stands out is I don't feel like he appears as a confident player on the ice. And I think that might be the most alarming part. And again, the D pairs have been all mixed up because of the injuries. So we haven't seen this outside of the 3 games. We haven't seen this defense core at its full strength yet. But I would say, it's concerning the way Travis has played early in the season. And again, the way he just appears to not be a confident player right now.
I do think it's worth noting, though, Joe, because I agree with you. I mean, we talk about this all the time. And the interesting thing is, I do wonder, people are going to absolutely skewer me for saying this, at what point you lose he's a really good skater as like main strength vibe when your skating has looked bad quite frequently, and last season as well. Like there were quite a few times where you're going like, oh my God, this guy's strength is supposed to be skating, and Phil Kessel is making him look like he's standing still. And, Phil Kessel doesn't really seem like he's blowing people away in conditioning drills. So what's going on? But I will say if Ristolainen and Sanheim have figured out like their chemistry, and I think both of them have a bit of like reactivity to their game where they're trying to figure out what the other one is going to do still. Last game was their best game as a pair. And it looked like they kind of understood each other's assignment more last game. If that's the future of that pair, I think there's lots of reasons to be hopeful for that D pair and what Travis Sanheim can do. But it is interesting because I wonder if some of it is the Phil Myers of it all as well, because Phil Myers had a bit of unpredictability to him also. And I think Travis became more of a reactive D pair partner than he was just like playing within his game. And it seems like now sometimes he's still a little bit like reactive in a way that you just want someone to play, not think about playing, if that makes sense. There's times on the ice where you go, what was he thinking there? Because clearly he overthought it, or clearly he got 1 second behind what he needed to do, and then he made a bad play. And I wonder if some of that is some reactivity to his old D partner, who we've talked about a million times. Everybody says Phil Myers potentially has a super high ceiling, but part of the problem with Phil Myers is you also don't know when he's going to go wrong and how bad it's going to go. That was his main criticism. And I think sometimes Travis felt like maybe he had to be the bailout guy, and that became a problem within his game, in my estimation. And I wonder with Ristolainen, and especially with him not starting the season because of injury and his own reputation as a defenseman and his own D zone as well, specifically, I wonder if sometimes he's like, what is my partner doing? Because that's what I have to react to, whatever. And I don't think that works for Sanheim. I think he just has to play. But I think if last game's any indicator, they'll be okay. But the skating thing, I kind of can't get over. Like I spent 2 years sideline. Every hit I did, like it was coaches talking about how good his skating is. And he covers a ton of ground quickly, but like sometimes you don't know where it goes.
Yeah, sometimes it's go ahead.
I was going to say, and Taryn, if you remember a couple seasons ago when you were still traveling with the team early in the season, when they got back from where they had Lausanne, where they started the season, or was that the preseason?
Prague.
I can't even remember. Prague. Yeah. So Sanheim had this plague of falling down in the defensive zone
Yeah.
as a guy blew by him. I mean, it happened 4 or 5 games in a row. And that was alarming. So he seems to get into these ruts of the bad play kind of spirals on him, and it just builds on, and
I think it's the thinking about playing versus playing. I really do. I think to be honest with you, you see it. And now we're just going to go on a defenseman tangent here, but I think personally, it bothers me. I know it bothers other people as we watch the games and we discuss it. I think Provy does the same thing when he's on the power play. Like I would love to see Yandel on the top power play unit, because you see Provy think about playing versus Yandel just like changes pace and speed and makes these passes immediately without it. Like Yandel, it seems, is more instinctive quarterbacking the power play, whereas you can tell Provy is thinking about it. And I think maybe Provy will make fewer mistakes because he is more cautious in that way. But it reminds me, watching Provy on the power play reminds me of when Travis Sanheim is not playing up to his potential, because you can literally see like the gears turning as they have the puck on their stick versus, when you watch Claude Giroux is like one step. Oscar Lindblom, super high hockey IQ. When Oscar Lindblom is playing his best hockey, he knows where the puck is going to go before he puts it there. And you can tell, like, he's so quick about his decision-making. And when Travis doesn't think about playing and he plays, Travis Sanheim is that guy who you understand why they took him so early in the draft and who has tremendous potential and is a very good defenseman. But I do think that some of his delay, kind of like tape delay sometimes, I think it is because of he's been conditioned that way from Phil Myers, to be quite frank, as much as I really have hope and like potential for Phil Myers' career. And I think there's maybe a little hangover of that with Ristolainen because they're still figuring each other out. And sometimes Ristolainen gives you some stuff to figure out. So my 2 cents.
I think that second defensive pair again will be one that's going to, you're going to need patience with. I think the Flyers understand that too. It's 2 players that are a little bit younger that haven't exactly figured it out in terms of their careers. Like they're not Ryan Ellis and Ivan Provorov where they're accomplished and they're there. Like they're established, and they're there. So it's going to take some time. I think Sanheim really has maybe turned a corner. 2 of his last 3 games, I would say, were pretty good. And I think sometimes I know even us media folks, me included, we tend to microanalyze, his bad plays. Like every little thing he does bad, we tend to highlight it. But then when he makes a really good, quiet play, we don't really recognize it as much. I thought in DC he played really well, and no one really noted it as much. But that's just me. But yeah, I agree with Joe. He can be more confident and better.
We talked about it on the post-game show for an entire segment. Okay, so I would like to, because here's what I'll say, and I've talked a lot on this podcast, but whatever. And I brought this up on a different podcast as well. There is a section of Sanheim apologists that every mistake he makes, it's like because of this or because of that, like everything I just said. I mean, I probably just was one for the past 10 minutes when I was talking. And on the flip side of things, in the same games where him and Ristolainen struggle an equal amount, it's, oh my gosh, the Flyers lost this trade and this, that, and the next thing. And this guy's never going to get the Buffalo off of him. And, he's trash, like, and whatever. And it's that dynamic of the benefit of the doubt versus the absolute doubt, where I'm like, you guys, we gotta put them both at level. Yeah. And then when they play well, acknowledge the parts of the games that they played well. And when they play bad, you acknowledge where they play bad and you break it all down and you hope for more the next day. But to your point, it's like, I do think that maybe we're starting to see the true identity of that pair emerge. You're starting to see Ristolainen get involved more offensively, which was a big part of his game in Buffalo. AV said he wants to see that bomb of a shot he has and all of that. And I think when you're starting to see them develop a comfort level where they are getting involved in that way. Sanheim loves to get in on the rush. Like there's lots to that pair. There's a lot of potential. And I think they're just finding it now. So I know patience is not synonymous with Philadelphia sports, but like, I do think we're getting to the brink of patience where it becomes something. So we'll see. But I gave him credit on that postgame show.
You did.
I said this was Travis Sanheim's best game.
Yes, and I was watching too. I was watching as I was working remotely, and I heard you say that. And I feel like the guys on the broadcast did a great job. Jim Jackson and Keith Jones both called out his positive plays and recognized it. So no, it's not everyone. I guess I'm more pointing towards Twitter, where you see a Sanheim mistake and you see it blow up your timeline. But when he makes a good play, like crickets, it's like you can't have it both ways. Like you got to be able to note when he does well and note when he does bad. But that's just
Twitter is dumpster fire.
The thing is on Twitter.
Just gotta stay off Twitter, Jordan.
It's true.
The thing is on Twitter, if Sanheim didn't make a mistake, somebody else would, either in the hockey game or in life or and any other aspect of life, and people would just complain about that.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Well, so for
someone got mad at me the other day that I didn't talk about. Someone got mad at me the other day that I didn't talk about Claude Giroux's struggles in the postseason enough. And I was like, it's the 5th game of the season and Claude Giroux's playing well. Why do you want me to talk about postseason numbers going back to 2014? I'm just never going to do that. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, when we get to the playoffs, I'll talk about it. Just for you, sir, who has a dog as your avatar, but insults the way I look. Just for you. I will do that for you, sir. God bless. Like, I hate that stupid website.
For my not so good surprise, I will stick with the defenseman theme. I'll say Nick Seeler playing 9 games. That's not a slight on Nick Seeler. It was just that I did not anticipate the Flyers needing their 7th defenseman to play 9 games. That's more than Rasmus Ristolainen has played. That's of course more than Ryan Ellis has played. So that is not a good thing in my opinion. You don't want Nick Seeler, your 7th defenseman, playing 9 of 10 games. You want him when it's occasional or here and there. Good for Nick Seeler. I think he's a good player. He didn't play all of last season at all, and he's come in and he's really shown that he can be reliable and depended on. So I think that's good for Nick Seeler, but I certainly would like to see him playing less games, maybe down in Lehigh Valley a little bit, maybe in the press box. That hasn't happened because of injuries. So for me, that's the not so good surprise. I don't think a lot of people even knew who Nick Seeler was going into training camp. I had known him a little bit because I had to read up on him when they signed him, but other than that, didn't know a whole lot about him, and now I feel like we know a lot more about him. Taryn Hatcher is saying she knew all about him for the last 5 years.
No, I didn't. I have no problem owning my stuff. Like, to be fair, also, like for the draft and the trade deadline, I was in Hawaii with no TV and like poor internet and poor cell service. So like I was very much like when I could get an email through with press releases and stuff so I was playing catch up all summer long. But when we got into camp and it's like, oh yeah, Nick Seeler's going to make this hockey team, I was like, spit take, like what? But happy surprise. Like I said before, Nick Seeler, like shockingly serviceable, which again is not a discredit to Nick Seeler, but like you expect, I think sometimes for your 7th defenseman to look like a 7th defenseman. And he's just in a good way. You don't notice him when he's out on the ice, which is all you can ask for. Like, just don't be noticeable in a way that hurts the team. And beyond that, I mean, the drop in the gloves and all of it, getting Wells Fargo Center absolutely riled up. Like the man is at least this season a legend here in Philadelphia. So credit to Nick Seeler, but Jordan, I mean, you shouldn't this early in the season. It's a little scary how much you call upon him.
Yeah, I know. Taryn perfectly put. I would say, like, I haven't noticed him a ton, and that's a good thing. Like, you're not noticing him, which means he's not making mistakes. He's playing sound, and that's good. So that would be my not so good. Nick Seeler, 9 games, more than Rasmus Ristolainen and Ryan Ellis. But we'll see if the Flyers can get healthier. They're 6-2-2. They play the Maple Leafs on Wednesday night. Again, Taryn Hatcher will have pre and post game live, produced by our very own Joe Fordyce. Positive start so far for the Flyers, 6-2-2. Tough to complain about that. But Taryn Hatcher and Joe Fordyce, thank you so much as always. Taryn Hatcher's got one more point. Let's go.
No, I'm going to ask publicly on the podcast. I know I should know this, but I'm going to ask because it's a 7:30 puck drop, right, Joe? Yes. What time are we on air? 6:30?
Yes, 6:30.
Okay. So just folks, just heads up, it may be a different time. But 7:30 puck drop. So tune into pre and post game beforehand. But yeah, that's, Taryn, I literally didn't notice it was a 7:30 puck drop until like Sunday night.
Yeah, and it's salute to service night. So I think there's some pregame festivities, which we will have on the pregame show as well.
Thanks to all of those who serve, my brother included. Shout out, Kyle. I know you don't listen to this podcast, but in case you do, shout out to you.
No, amen to that. I love that. It's absolutely massive salute to those who serve. And I was curious too when I saw 7:30. I was like, oh, that's a little interesting. So Terry, I'm glad you mentioned that. 7:30 puck drop, 6:30 for pre and post game.
This is literally like what TV is like, guys. Is you're just checking the schedule the day before, because if you think too much about the games ahead, it starts to spiral and you get stressed out. So, yeah. So there you go.
Just like the players, just like the players, we are game to game, taking it one game at a time. That's how we do it here.
Keeping it simple.
Yes. But Taryn Hatcher and Joe Flores, thank you so much as always. Great seeing you. Great chatting with you both. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru. And Flyers fans, as always, thank you for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate and listen, and we can't wait to talk to you next time.